everyone. Welcome to another episode of OpsCast, brought to you by marketingops.com and powered by all the MoPros out there. I'm your host, Michael Hartmann, flying solo as we are getting closer and closer to Mopspalooza 2025, which unfortunately I'm not going to be at. So if you're going to be there, I'm in jealousy mode right now. So the FOMO is real. All right. But today we are exploring what it takes to build and run an effective marketing operations in highly regulated industries. So think finance, healthcare, legal services, things like that. To do that, my guest is Danielle Balestra, a seasoned fractional marketing technology executive who has built stacks and teams across both regulated and non-regulated environments. She and I are going to dive into the unique challenges of operating within legal and compliance constraints, how to earn trust across functions, and what leaders should look for when building an ops team that works well, either with or without those constraints. So, Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, this is fun. I'm glad we could do it. All right, well, let's start maybe big picture here. What do you, especially since you've been in both regulated and not as regulated industries, like what makes highly regulated industries unique when it comes to marketing and marketing operations?
A lot of the technology you're working with in the highly regulated industry might still be on-prem. And if you think about it, it makes sense because they have very sensitive data, either be health records or your banking account information. So they kept a lot of that information in their own servers and they maintain them there. So there's firewalls. And to build these custom experiences, you have to be very creative about how to get information from the secure locations without compromising any data security, but still giving our customers a really good experience. So that's a huge hurdle that you have, and you have to be willing to try new things because the normal playbooks of like just plug and play an API
Right,
in might not work.
right.
The
Oh, we
other
can't
big
connect these two systems. I'm
difference,
going to get Zapier and just throw that in the middle, right? Not going to work for
no,
you.
not going to work for you. You might be hearing words like FTP, FSTP sites, and you're going to be like, what are you talking about? Yep. You might be sending cold CSV files from one server to another. You're going to be making, codes or little, I'm missing the word today, but you're going to be making codes that can actually connect and take away identifying information from your
Yeah,
on-prem server to your cloud-based information. So a lot of creativity there. The other big difference is the speed to approving a vendor. So because of those security hurdles, every technology you're going to need to approve or bring on board can take anywhere from 9 months to over a year to get cleared.
sure. Yeah,
So a lot of those highly regulated companies will be looking at platforms that have multiple offerings for you to use as a service.
oh, yeah,
So
yeah. So, because if you're going to commit to a vendor,
you're going to be going with an Adobe, a Salesforce, an SAP, and Oracle. Like that's usually where it's easiest because they have the most offerings across the board with their products. So, and for somebody who needs those services, it's easier to just pull something that's already approved as a vendor.
yep,
Whereas, if you're doing a point solution, they have to be really strong and they have to be very secure. Like you need to know
yeah,
that they're not going to be sold in 6 months or
sure.
change their company name. Like a lot of those things can cause major disruptions on the onboarding of a new tech.
Yeah. I suspect there's going to be a number of people listening to this episode, and they're going to like, hey, what does SFTP mean? Well, look, we're going to leave that as a mystery for them, right?
We can.
Not familiar with it. Still use it occasionally, believe it or not. So, and not even in a highly regulated environment, but a big organization. So, all right. So maybe let's talk about this. Like, that's really eye-opening because I think my assumption of what you were going to say was going to be around having to deal with things like legal review of marketing materials, right? Which is kind
I
of an
mean, that's
obvious one.
there. I mean, that's there, but I think for managing your full stack, that's not part of it. The harder thing is to get the tools you need in-house first.
Yeah,
Once they're there, I'm going to say honestly, the relationships you can build with your compliance officers and your legal teams can actually make things move faster. Like when I
yeah,
was working at a bank, we had two different compliance groups. There was one for the consumer facing materials, and there was one that was for our commercial facing materials. And we worked out different sort of checklists and processes. We knew what we could or could not say in our communications and emails.
Sure.
Things were sent and reviewed, and we moved things along quickly, and it was an easy enough call for me to pick up the phone and reach out to any of those compliance officers if anything got stuck.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
to me, that's actually like not as big of a hurdle. And I know,
No, the point
if
about
you're
on
in,
premise is like that's actually really a big deal, right, these days. So
well, I
handling
mean,
about it,
everyone would think everybody's in the cloud, but that's not the case.
right? Yeah, you still have server rooms with like heavy locks on them and stuff, right? So
A lot of air conditioning.
a lot of air conditioning. Very interesting stuff. Yeah. All right, so let's take it down maybe to the level of if we've got people who are thinking about or maybe about to go into an organization that's in a highly regulated industry, like from a MOPS team structure. So how does that affect like what you look for in team members, structure, the way you operate?
I'm looking for people who are very much learner mindsets. So, and what I mean by that is when I talk to an individual, if they are confused why there's an ops team within this industry, that to me is a little like red warning flag, because what you want to have is you want to have somebody that can take the principles of marketing operations, being it either processes or just data principles, have that base, but now apply it to what might be more relationship focused. So a lot of these highly regulated industries, like your bank doesn't think of it yourself in your own shoes when it comes to banking or your medical provider. You're not concerned about being passed on to be sold for more services. Like your health is your health. Like you need to know important things about the conditions you might or be concerned about that you either have or genetically, potentially could have.
Right.
You don't want them passing your information on to certain people or, trying to encourage you to go get this testing or this whatever. So it's more about relationship, building trust, making people feel comfortable with you as a service provider. And with that, you're going to have to take different principles to that data, but the foundations are all the same. Like you still need to have data knowledge. You need to be able to build systems. You're going to have to connect systems in a really unique way. So that's why I said the
Yeah.
creativeness is very important. So those are the things that if somebody's looking to come into it, they need to be sort of open and curious, want to know what they can learn in this space, what they can apply from their previous experiences. There will be no SDRs. There will be no sales team. There will be different people who are getting this information, and it's important for them. So creating a unified experience, that's really important. So how do you get into the data, making sure all the data is in a state where you have one person represented for whatever services they're supposed to be receiving or whatever products they're receiving.
Sure.
So it's a lot of conversations with different groups. But again, being curious, being open, and then what type of challenges the organization have? Are they trying to build their marketing tech stack? Do they have one existing and it's challenged and it's not giving the right customer experience? So I did recently identify some different personas to help people understand where they could sit and what they are excited about. So depending on where the organization is, those different personas make sense. So you'd have to, in your interviewing process, find out like, are you introducing new technology? How long has the technology you've had on hand been there and how well is it working? Because that will tell you, are they looking for a builder? Are they looking for somebody to come and fix something that's broken? Those are very important. So that
Right.
will help give you that. The data analyst, everyone's needing to get insights. So that's very important. And
Yeah.
it's even more so because there's different data places, like I said, on-prem versus in the cloud. And then hopefully you're getting a leader who's helping guide you through it as a strategist. So that's what I think when it comes to moving into this space and what to be looking for.
Right. So, so one thing you mentioned in that you talked about in the banking world where you have the consumer, right, retail banking clients and commercial banking clients, probably two different things, right? One's more of a, I'll call it B2C, one's maybe more B2B. I I assume in the like the medical world, depending on where, like there might be a similar thing where you need to be able to straddle both of those. Is that another, like, do you need people who can kind of go between like consumer facing stuff and more B2B facing stuff and kind of go there? And if this is where I don't know, like, are the tool sets different for those?
Not usually.
Okay.
So, when I was at the commercial bank, we used the same marketing automation platform across everything. The difference was the data sources we were working off of. So, like,
Okay.
some of them were sales facing, like almost like sales facing. So, they
Like
did have
brokers.
Salesforce. So, you'd have a commercial banker, or you'd have, these different, like, we had equipment financing. So, we'd have equipment finance bankers there. So, those people were using Salesforce. But when it came to, like, the actual consumer side, those were all in data warehouses and in data
Hmm.
secure places. So, like, that's a whole different world. And we had to work with our data science team on doing insights and information.
Yeah.
The principles are all still there. Like, everyone has some type of goal. Like, are we trying to increase account openings? Are we trying to increase balances? Are we trying to increase loans? What are the goals? And then you just work with each data team. It's fun because it's challenging. It's almost like working for
Right.
a couple of different companies at once when you work through that spectrum of B2B, B2C. Not every bank's the same. Some of them don't offer that wide, breadth of, services. The healthcare is interesting from my experience because it was a provider, so it was a hospital.
Okay.
But when you think about the hospital operating, there's so many stakeholders that are in place. So you have the patients, you have the caregivers, but you also have the doctors. And we had this amazing referral program that we were able to trace, like where most of our referrals were coming from, and we established sort of like a doctor to doctor referral like meeting. So like we try and increase the relationships of the doctors in those regions with our doctors on hand so that they can refer patients as things came up for us to help them with. So that was like a very interesting
That is
B2B
interesting.
type of play in a B2C world. So that's why this is a fun, creative space. If you're willing and you feel confident with your base knowledge, like this is a really interesting experience to play as a marketing ops professional.
Yeah, that's a really interesting scenario there. So, um, you've kind of maybe touched on this a little bit though, but like what, like from a culture standpoint, I think a lot of people listening feels like are heavy in this community that lean toward SaaS or tech companies or early stage things like that, right? So there's like probably cultural norms that are there. What have you seen in terms of maybe whether it's between regulated and non-regulated or across the different regulated industries where you've seen, like what are the cultural things that you've seen that are maybe different and how those might affect ops professionals when they're in those?
I don't know if it's so much regulated versus non-regulated, but what I did notice a difference is when you go from like 50 or 70 employees or 120 employees to 4,000 or 7,000 or 16,000 employees. That's a huge difference. And when you're in a small and mighty team, everyone could be a little bit matrixed and everyone understands each other's roles and they're just running and going at whatever the direction is that the company's giving them. When you're in enterprise, when you're in a large organization, even the department you're sitting in might be very siloed. So, when I was at the healthcare organization, there was over 157 people in the marketing department and communications department. That's a big department.
Yeah.
So, like, you have to feel comfortable with networking and talking to people. Hopefully, you have a good director in charge who is, sort of guiding and creating paths for you to meet others and to find opportunities for you to help with. That's why I liked working in the enterprise environments is like you can start finding new projects within your own company and share the value of this technology you're investing in that they don't even know about. My joke was like I used to love going to we had ServiceNow at one of my employers and all the technology was listed in there. So I'd find out like what MarTech other divisions have and call them and be like, hey, I see that you're using XYZ. Could we have a conversation? Because I would like to see if we can expand it to my division. So, I mean, like, it's a very different experience. You have to be a little bit more open to having conversations. it can be very siloed, and that's where it
Yeah.
gets to feel like a little like claustrophobic because you want to be helpful for the organization, but sometimes people feel like they have to stay in a lane. But really, most people are willing and open to having, you know, work on projects. One of the best projects I had was I found out about in the coffee room and my and when I was working in the bank, like it just I kept hearing the word Salesforce. I'm like, who's talking about Salesforce over here? And I introduced myself to them and say, oh, I'm in charge of the marketing automation platforms that are connected to your system. What are you guys doing there? So like that was like a natural lead. And not that I think a lot of people are in the same building anymore, but that was a
Right.
great way to like meet more and expand. So it's really the size and the silos that are probably the biggest cultural
Yeah.
challenge that I've seen.
It's funny. You and I were talking before we started hitting the record button about how I actually miss being in an office, right? And it's part of it is those kinds of scenarios where you just sort of serendipitously, have conversations or walk in on a conversation that can have kind of, you know, minor or major impacts to, what you're doing or your career. Curious though, like what you're saying about like networking, having conversations, all resonates with me. I suspect there's going to be people who are listening who are going to be, whether they're telling themselves a story or not, right? It's like I'm more like that's uncomfortable. I don't know what to say. Like, do you have any tips for how to how to approach that if they're maybe feel like they're an introvert or whatever?
I would say just start small. Don't go feel like you need to talk to everybody. Just try and have like a coffee meeting. Like if your organization offers something like that, I don't know how big the organizations are, but like I think
Yeah.
about I used to help out at Amex as a consultant, and they used to have the coffee chats. They had a bowl, and you put your information in the bowl, and people would pull information out, and they would call you and just have a random conversation. So depending on like what organization you're in, like there used to be a Slack channel for marketing ops community that used to do this thing called Donut, where they would just
Yep.
randomly, bring you to somebody else. So I think just start small, just try and meet one person. And if anything, the best question to ask is, do you recommend me speak to anybody else so that you have a warm introduction to the next person in the organization? Me as I've always been ballsy, so I'm like, oh hey,
Yeah.
these are the 5 people that I need to talk to. I'm just going to get on their calendar, and I
Right.
would start with an email, and if they don't respond, I put a meeting. And
uh,
some people like that's the thing, like you don't know how they're going to react. Some people don't respond to emails. Some people are happy that you put a meeting on, and they're like, thank you for setting this up. And you're
yeah.
just like, I emailed you 3 times, but you're welcome.
Yeah. Do you, when you do something like that, this is getting very tactical, but do you do like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour?
It depends on what the conversation is. If it's really for me to understand tactically what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve, what their department goal is, I try and leave longer time because I also want to share a little bit about myself, not just be
Sure.
like, give me all your information and thank you, bye.
Right.
Like I also plan on, sharing why I reached out, what I'm trying to figure out, and why, this is important for us to have a conversation. So, there are great books out there about also just networking. It's funny, I just read The Long Game by Dory Clark,
Ooh, okay,
and
that's on my
she
list.
talks about like long-term goals. So like some of it might be relevant in the work environment, but it is good for just general networking, just about like how to work through that and how to use it not just like as a transactional experience, but more as a relationship building experience.
Yeah. I think the one thing I might add to your idea there is, you're probably already interacting with a number of people that are outside of your kind of core area, right? So, like, there's already a connection, right? And so reaching out and asking for, hey, I'd love to learn more about what your day or week looks like and how we can maybe learn from each other. I think, there are going to be people who are not interested in it, but I think my experience has been if you ask, like most people are more than willing to share. Right? They
Absolutely.
actually they actually appreciate that. Um, and I like your point about like trying to make it reciprocal a little bit. Like, what can I do for you as well is a good thing. And then once you do that, like I mean, like what I what I've learned, and it's kind of what I try to do with my own children to some degree is like the anxiety and fear about all the potential like things like that they may say no, yeah, they may, but like what's the worst? Like that's you haven't lost anything if you do it in a respectful way, right?
You hope
So
that they don't say no too, because that also reflects on them. Like you hope they're
yeah,
open and willing to share, but most people are. Most people are more than happy to share and talk about themselves and help you out by giving you the knowledge they have.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's the point, right? Is like it is this if all you do is dwell on all the worst case scenario, right? It's you're never going to do it because it's like the fear of that is going to overwhelm you. But like I said, like yeah, strap on a little courage and go make the ask. Do one,
I
just do
guess
one.
I guess the same thing applies if you want to play with AI. So I hate to turn this into AI, but I know everyone's talking about AI, but I bet people are dabbling on it and they are interested in it. It's the same thing as learning from somebody else. Like, there's no reason why, just asking a question. It doesn't have to be a long conversation. Like some executives, I don't even spend a full 15 minutes with. It's just like, hey, how are you doing? Or, quick, like, questions. They're happy to answer it, and then you keep going, and then you already established your relationship, so the next time you ask for time, it's easier to get on their calendar.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you bring up AI because I have done that myself. Like I've been playing around with it, and I see or hear other people who seem to be further along in that journey of understanding it. And I've reached out to people. It's like, hey, are you willing to spend 30 minutes, like, help me accelerate my learning? And to your like my experience has been what I expected, right? They were more than willing to do that. There was a limit, and I didn't want to, ask more than I felt was good, but they were all well. Like I've learned from every one of those.
Yeah.
So, yeah, totally agree with that. All right, so let's go back to this whole like regulated industries, and you touched on this about like compliance teams and legal teams. You talked a little bit about how you've worked with them, at least in one scenario. Yeah, what I think there's going to be some people in marketing or marketing ops who try like avoid the attorneys like the plague, um, which is weird for me because I'm married to an attorney or a recovering attorney, as she would say. Um, and I've been fortunate that most places I've been, I've had like good attorneys and legal teams and compliance teams to work with who are yeah, in general, like there's a line where they say, no, absolutely no, we can't do that. But most of the time, there's a lot of gray area and they're willing to work with you in it. So, how have you approached working with those teams and maybe guided the rest of your team on like as part of their career progression, right? To build those kinds of strong, proactive relationships with those teams.
I always loved the legal teams. I think because I'm also, even though I'm in this space, I am very concerned about my own personal data and my children's data. Like I'm
Sure.
very much like it's not really for anyone to have and to use. I need to give it to you and you need to have permission to use it when it comes to personal. When it comes to commercial, like I do expect to get sold to all day long about being a marketing operations executive. Like that's fine.
Sure.
I expect that.
Right.
But I do think there are some spaces where we should be respectful of our customers or prospects. And that's why I think I come to the legal teams and share that like if a new regulation came into effect, which I was in highly regulated industries when GDPR came into impact
Yeah.
in a New York based hospital, it's like, why are we spending so much time? It's because we did do a lot of research, and we were working with international hospitals on the research we were doing for
Ah,
cancer.
sure.
So GDPR was very important, more for the research piece, not as much for the marketing piece. But I still participated. I still sat with all the legal team, and I still talk to them today. They'll see me in Grand Central every once in a while. I'll be like, "Hey, how are you doing?" So it was like we just established really good relationships, and they knew that I was just as concerned about providing a poor experience to our prospects and customers. It made them feel comfortable with myself and my team to know that they could trust that we're not going to, do anything that would compromise the organization's position in those data regulations. Same thing with when CD. Oh my God, what is the California protection? I'm forgetting my acronyms.
I don't even remember what it is. Is it CCPR? Is that right?
Yes, something. I know it changed because there was like a data aspect to it, but when that was going into effect, we had a California bank and I was at a bank and we had California clients. So like we had to do it both ways because we had actual organization in the state of California and then we had clients in the state of California. So we had to do a whole bunch of fun things there with how we were approaching delete, how we had to keep, for operational purposes, certain aspects of delete. So it was very interesting, again, right up there with our, chief data privacy officer, working through the terms, working through how our systems work, figuring out how we could comply with those laws. Any regulator, any complaints, like we immediately would take action on it. So those, I think I was fortunate that I was there when these regulations were coming out and worked very closely with those teams, and they knew how much I was concerned about it as a consumer as well as a person operating. So I think that created some confidence. I think we just need to be conscious of that. Like, even though this is data and maybe you can have access to it, but does the customer want you to have access to all of it? Just take a seat, just take a stop and think. Like, we can't assume because, Google's doing it, that means it's right. Like, we need to think about what does the person on the receiving end feel about it. And they've indicated they're not happy. That's why these regulations are coming about, because they don't want you to just blanket email them all day long or just assume that you need a service or a product from them because of XYZ item. So I think that's how I've created good relationships with them, and also be like personable a little bit, like find out like what you might have in common. Could it be a sports team? Could it be, a TV show? Like, could it be anything that makes them more human and you more human so that it's an easier relationship to have?
Yeah, one of the things as you've been talking that also, like, I've been involved with lots and lots of contract negotiations, right? And typically legal teams. It's actually the one time where I had a bad experience at one place where I felt like I was negotiating against my own attorney, right? I felt more on the client or vendor side, but I think that's another place where you can. I think they also want to see that you have some competence too, right? They don't. I don't think they expect you to understand the laws or the regulations in any kind of detail, but I think they want to see that you understand the nuance of it, and because I think that it's another one of those scenarios where you can build your credibility, which then when it comes to where there's maybe not even gray area about regulation, but like take GDPR as an example, right? I think there's there's a spectrum of levels of which you could comply, right? Depending on risk tolerance, right? So like
it's also by the regions. Like, each region has their own level of GDPR. It's not one centralized anymore. Like Luxembourg and Germany and I think it's Germany or Belgium are stronger than France and stronger than England. So like it can be confusing when you're in actually the marketplace and you have to figure out like what is there consent, is there double consent, is it more commercial versus consumer?
And like,
it's challenging.
There's a legitimate business decision that could be made that says, do we want to quote fully comply, or take on the risk that we get a complaint and we have to pay a fine, right? So
yeah,
I mean, there's obviously the other parts like damage to reputation, yada yada yada. But my point is, like, I think if you build that kind of trust that you're willing to like go through that exercise of going like, what are the trade-offs between, 100% compliant across all these different regions that are unique, that's super expensive and convoluted, versus something that's like 70% complete, but it exposes us to a little more risk, right? Is that like, but it's a significantly lower cost and impact. Like, that's like what I found is more that the attorneys I like to work with are willing to have that kind of conversation about those trade-offs, right? Now, at the same time, like I said, like the ones I was like, there's a point where they go like, no, absolutely not. We cannot, like, we have to do this.
Well, it's also like, is your organization have a bullseye on its back right now?
Yeah.
Because that's another thing. Like, there's so many factors to think about that risk spectrum. And the more you talk to your compliance or legal teams, the more you understand where your organization is at that time, and like how, how risky can you be.
Yeah.
The customer experience should always be everyone's concern, and that should be a top priority, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a lower priority, and they just, awareness is a very important thing for them. Like, so putting yourselves a little bit at risk or annoying the prospect or customer a little bit is in some teams' mind lower than
Yep.
getting the, 100 people who
Yeah.
forgot about you attention.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And I think that's the point. Like, it's another example for me where I talk about this a lot, right? The world is there's very few things in life that are very clear cut,
Oh,
right or wrong, black and white, whatever. Pick the very binary sort of thing. Like, there's lots of gray area, and a lot of it has to do with trade-offs, right?
oh yeah.
And so that falls in the same category, and the best attorneys I've worked with um, recognize that, right, in the way they operate. So, okay, I'm trying to decide where to go from here a little bit. Maybe let's go next into, like, you mentioned that cultural stuff is driven by organization size more than industry, maybe, or even regulated versus deregulated. So, in my experience with um, big organizations, yeah, it requires a lot of collaboration, patience, persistence, right? Do you find the same thing? And
Oh yeah.
again, kind of like, do you see any differences when you've been in regulated versus non-regulated industries or
No,
lightly
it's
regulated?
the same.
Yeah,
No, it's
okay.
the same thing. It's you have to be coming in curious all the time. Your manager might not even have the same experience as you. So like you can't come in and say, well, this person's, in charge of Salesforce, so they must have years of Salesforce experience. That was not the case for me once, and I was just like, okay.
Yeah,
So I guess never assume. Always be curious and even ask questions. Like if somebody is giving you direction, clarify. Just make sure alignment's there. I know these are all sort of like soft swag
right.
jargon words, but like this is really important. Is like make sure everyone's rowing in the same direction. Like what are we all trying to achieve? It's amazing how sometimes certain words everyone has a different meaning for it. Like
It
innovative
is.
could be meant three different ways to three different people. So find
I
out and make
I had
sure
this
that
exact
like
conversation earlier today about the term micro segment. I was like, what does that even mean? Anyway,
But yeah, be curious, have a lot of conversations, be open. Don't come with your previous judgments. Try and be as open as you can to get to understand what they're trying to get to and accomplish what's trying to be achieved.
okay, got it. Yeah, sounds consistent with everything else we talked about. So in that same vein about like um, being patient, I assume like, do you have to build in your like go to market process stuff extra time for things like reviews and approvals and that kind of stuff? Like, how does that affect those kinds of processes when you're in a highly regulated industry?
Well, I mean, unless there's like an absolute hard deadline, like are you releasing a product that has to be announced that day?
Yeah.
Most things are self-made deadlines and we can get it out when we can get it out. Like to try and rush something out on a Friday makes no sense. We can hold it until Monday. And a lot of, compliance reviews, we do pad in as much time as we can. So that puts more pressure on the creative and the campaign teams to like make sure they have clear messaging, their copywriting's already completed, the images already cleared. They already know what will trigger a violation, so they should already have like a bank of like pre-approved type images that they could use in the creative,
So interesting. Like,
so
I
that
wouldn't have even thought about the images, but I could imagine in certain
you
ones, like
can,
there's,
yeah, because like
yeah,
certain representation,
yeah,
there's a lot of laws that like fair lending and all these things, like you have to know that like you can't do certain things. So, all those pre-approved images, the copy, the language within the copy, and we usually give them like, most teams they're also understaffed. The compliance team doesn't have an endless number of people, but they are going to be And they
Sure.
might be looking at multiple versions of things for multiple divisions. Depends on how big the organization is. Most of the time, we gave them like, I think, a day, day and a half. And I think sometimes we can get it a little bit faster. But just give them the room to also do their job. Again, everyone's running a tight ship, so they might not have the bandwidth to do something rush or to get it out. And if you are launching a big product, usually everyone's aware and they're all marching towards that launch together.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting about the images. I hadn't even really thought of that as being a part of like a compliance kind of review, but it totally makes sense. I could see that. So just curious, do you like this also to me ties back to this building a relationship with those teams, right? Because if you do need to come in and say, hey, this one needs to get bumped up, if you've built that relationship, right, there's usually they'll either go extra or they'll work with you on, hey, this one takes priority. The one you were working on that we said was due today, get it tomorrow or the next day, right?
Yeah,
So,
no, and that does help and that does happen. Because what you don't want is like I might get a phone call saying like, this person did this. Like, all right, well, I think they didn't explain fully why. So like give the context of the prioritization changes if there are changes happening.
yeah,
Because what you don't want is you don't want those compliance or legal teams calling your boss or your boss's boss or the person they know to say like what's going on, why are they doing this, and start complaining, because those people don't have context of what's happening. So
right.
you want to have as much information and sort of share, to say like, hey, I'm sorry this is confusing, but this is now a priority. I've been told this is no longer a priority. Could we switch? Could you get this done sooner?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Well, why don't we wrap up here? We talked a lot about some of the uniqueness of highly regulated industries. If there's anyone who's listening here who's either transitioning from one to the other, maybe, but in particular, I think moving from a less regulated to more regulated industry, and kind of working through, or has made the transition, is trying to kind of make things more compliant. Like, what's your best advice to them, like how to approach that?
I would suggest first reading The First 90 Days. That's a great book,
Right.
for
Big fan
anyone
of
starting
that.
a new job.
Yep.
Start there. But I would suggest go a little slower. So if you are coming from a fast pace, that's going to be a huge change. It's like jumping into a
Yes.
cold ocean, going from like run, 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 emails all weekend, emails at night to, I was at the healthcare organization. I didn't get an email past 4:30. I was like, what is happening?
Right.
Like it's such a nice work-life balance. So be curious as well. Like, come to all of your meetings with curiosity, be eager to learn, be very patient with others and with yourself. You might also have lost some tasks and responsibilities you had at a previous organization. They might now need you really just focus on one
Right.
vertical of what you're working on. It's good to share, but also remember to have them come to you with questions. But I'm sorry, my cat just now wants to come in front of my camera. Uh,
That's the life we live in these days, right?
yep, there he
There's the
is.
cat. All right. There we go.
Sorry about that. So yeah, I would tell them be curious, be patient, and definitely just, be open to learning new stuff. You have a lot to offer, so be excited to bring that your experience. But just know you have to probably retool it to what the new organization needs.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up about like going to meetings and being curious. Kind of a nuance for me is because I generally try to avoid meetings when I can. The one time when I generally like accept everything is when I first enter, especially a big organization, because so much about that is building relationships and knowing who does what and trying to learn and absorb as much as possible. So I tend to be overdo that, even though it's not my normal tendency. Um, and so, because what I find is a lot of big organizations, people tend to be, they over invite people to meetings because they don't want to hurt feelings. I always tell people like,
I feel like some people don't know what other people do. They're like, maybe we should include them, or they're always
yeah,
been in this meeting, so we keep them in the meeting.
yeah. And I'm like, I'm like, I tell people all the time if they're like, yeah, I'm invited to a meeting. I'm like, I don't know that I need to be in this meeting, so like carry on without me. Like if you do need me, like maybe keep me on the invite and we use Teams, right? I'll be on the Teams chat or the Slack channel or whatever. If you need me, I'll hop on or we can talk about it separately. But like, I don't feel the need to, like, my ego is not caught up in whether or not you're going to include me in a meeting, especially if one where I'm like just sitting there. Like, it's about the like biggest waste of time. When I see that in a big organization, I see all these heads are just like doing what I'm doing, looking down at their phones and not paying attention or whatever, right? We're not on camera. It's like, you don't need to be here, right? It's okay. So that's like one cultural norm. If I could make that change everywhere I've been, which has been a larger organization, I would do it 100 out of 100 times. So anyway, well, hey, I know we are short on time, Danielle. So much fun. Really enjoyed it. I wish I was going to see you at Mopsapalooza.
I know.
But
I'm
we'll figure
gonna
out
miss
another
you.
time.
Yeah. For those who are going, I can't wait to see them.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it was a lot of fun. If folks want to connect with you or learn more about what you're doing these days, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn. My Danielle Balestra is, I think, the handle at the end of my LinkedIn URL. So definitely just connect.
Perfect. Sounds good. I almost don't know that I should ask that question anymore because I think the answer is always the same. But I'm always surprised. As soon as I
Yeah.
stop, that will be something different. Anyway, well, thank you again, Danielle. Appreciate it. I think everyone listening is going to be learn something from this. As always, thanks to our audience out there. Continue to support us. If you have ideas for topics or guests, feel free to reach out to Naomi, Mike, or me, and we'd be happy to get the ball rolling on that. Until next time, bye, everybody.